Hello and welcome to Master Gardening. I'm your host, Bud Kwok. We're here at the Kwok compound here today. We've got a heck of a show planned for you. We got beehives, we got greenhouse, we got raised beds, we got pruning. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. We're here at the bee yard, and last fall I medicated these hives so that we take care of the mites and the diseases that most of the bees die from. Last weekend I took the medication back off the hive, so they're clean now. But this is the most critical time of the life of a hive. They've stored honey and pollen in the fall, and hopefully that'll last through to the spring. If it doesn't, they'll die of starvation. So this time in spring is the most critical time for the food. So I am feeding these bees. There's probably no chance of them dying of starvation because I'm feeding them. These are just cups turned upside down with sugar water inside, and they will slowly drain that and probably be done with those cups probably by tomorrow. Then next weekend I'll put some supers, containers about this size, on top of them, and they'll start making honey for old Bud and his family. We'll take the honey next September. I just want to let you know this is one of the critical times. Give you a shot at it. They've stung me already once, but they won't bother you unless you bother them. I'm trying to be, oh, they're gathering. You can see stuff on their legs. They're really gathering the pollen this year. Oh, let's go do some pruning, Dan. Okay, this is spring, of course, and this is a good time of the year to be doing some pruning. Some of you already know I'm pruning. This is crepe myrtle. In crepe myrtle, the blooms bloom on new wood. You probably heard that before, and a lot of you may already know, but some shrubs bloom on new wood and some shrubs bloom on old wood. Crepe myrtle blooms on new wood, so it'll only bloom on what grows this year. So everything that's on here already is not going to have any blooms on it, so you can prune the heck out of it. And speaking of pruning the heck out of it, everybody does that to crepe myrtles. And I fought it for a while, and now I'm just part of the group. I really cut mine back. So if the shrub blooms on new wood, you can prune it in the fall or in the early spring. Shrubs that bloom on old wood, like azaleas, forsythia, flowering almond, they bloom on what wood grew last year. So they're going to bloom this spring on old wood. So you don't want to prune them now. Everything you prune off of as an azalea or a forsythia right now you're pruning off the blooms. Wait till after they bloom. It's always a solid fact. If you wait till right after a bloom to prune your shrubs, you'll be safe. So wait till after the azaleas and forsythias and the almonds and everything that's blooming right now blooms before you prune it. Roses, prune your roses now. Prune them right before they start budding out. Even your tea roses, any kind of roses, this is a good time of the year to be pruning. Knockout roses, they're like weeds. You can prune them any time of the year. And I've got a couple over here I'll show you in a little bit that I knock them down about half the size every year, and they grow right back. I've pruned them any time of the year. You just can't kill them. So just remember that golden rule. Wait till after they bloom to prune. Okay, let's go look at those knockout roses. Okay, these are the knockout roses I was talking to you about a minute ago. Normally these are about this big. They're twice as big, and they really are too big for this area. So I knock them back to this size every year, and it doesn't hurt them at all. You can prune them anytime you want to. Matter of fact, sometimes I prune them twice a year. They're like weeds. You can't kill them. They're really good. No diseases. I don't know how they did it, but they've bred them to resist funguses, the black spot, all those diseases. They're wonderful plants and bloom all year long. While we're here, let's talk about daffodils. Every place in my yard that we're going to take pictures today, you're going to see daffodils. And I didn't plant all these at one time. I planted a few at a time, And as they've got bigger and bigger clumps, I moved them and divided them and did all that. Now I've got thousands. I've got absolutely thousands. You see a lot of these are really early, but you see a lot of them with their heads hanging down in my yard, and everybody's got that. What's happened, these things have bloomed 2 or 3 weeks earlier than normal. And once they get that heavy head on there, that's a lot of weight for that neck. If we have a hard freeze, and we've had a couple since these started blooming, it weakens that neck even more, and then the bloom even hangs down more. It doesn't bother me, it just doesn't look the same as what you're used to looking at. And I've got all different kind of varieties. Here's 3 or 4 varieties right here. There's a bunch of varieties that haven't even started blooming yet. So once they start blooming with the different varieties that I planted, I can have daffodils like almost 3 months. Some of them are really beautiful. Some of them are just your plain old daffodils. Let me show you what clump over here, and I'll tell you what happens sometimes. It doesn't always happen, but with some of these varieties, here's a clump of daffodils here, and there's only about half a dozen blooms on this big, huge clump. Well, what in the heck happened there? Well, you might need some fertilizer. It never hurts to fertilize, but probably what's happened, these have reproduced and reproduced and reproduced, and the clump has got so oversaturated with bulbs that it won't bloom. So what I need to do is dig this up. I'll mark this with a stake so I'll know this is one of the ones I need to do it with. Once the greenery has died back and turned brown, I'll dig it up, divide them, and take some more different places. Now you do not want to dig these up or mow these down until that turns brown, because if you do, you're probably not going to have any daffodils next year. This greenery is storing up energy in the new bulb for next year. And without that, you're not going to have daffodils. You're going to have very few blooms. Okay, let's go on to the vegetable garden and the raised beds. Let's look at raised beds for a while, Dan. Okay, this is one of my favorite parts of gardening, my raised beds. The greenhouse is also, and hopefully we'll have time to do some work in there. These are 2x8s, 16 feet long, 4 foot wide. And the 4 foot is critical because that way you can get half of it from each side for weeding and harvesting and that kind of thing. They're 16 feet long. I've got a couple of 8-foot beds, but the soil in here is very rich. It didn't start out like that. I initially put the wood down and I just tilled the soil down inside. A little bit of fertilizer. It wasn't very rich. And every year I add a little compost, leaf material, plant material, and you can see it's just it's dark black gold. Over the years it just gets better and better. It's probably about, I'd say 15 years old these beds are. Now we put these beds to bed, put the beds to bed, that's good. Last winter. No, if you look at all my beds, there are no weeds. If you don't do this, you're gonna have weeds, and you have to pull weeds and pull weeds and pull weeds, and it's a lot of trouble to get ready in the spring. We took out the tomato plants and pepper plants on these beds, burned them, added a whole layer of compost for my compost bin. Then as I mowed the grass in the fall and I got all the leaves, I put those shredded leaves on top of the compost. No weeds whatsoever. So this time of year, all you have to do is take those leaves off, and I usually put them in another bed because sooner or later I'm going to use these to mulch my tomatoes and peppers. You remove the leaves, do a little bit more cleaning with a rake maybe, and rake it up, and it's like this. It's just beautiful and easy. It's a gardener's dream. Okay, while we're here, let's plant a little bit. It's this time of year to plant onion scallions. Most of you all know what scallions are. They're onions, but they don't bulb. They're just straight onions. You mince them up and put them on beans or different kind of salads and what have you. And they're real easy to grow, and they'll grow all year long. As a matter of fact, I've got some in another bed that I planted last year, and I'm still harvesting them. Little black seeds. I scratch a little, you could probably broadcast them on the surface, but I scratch a little bit of a trench here for them, and I sprinkle these in the trench, and then I just cover it over a little bit with a little bit of soil. Doesn't take much. Pat it down. Probably within a month, I'll be able to have these on my supper table. Okay, while we're here, let's do one more thing. It's that time of the year to plant lettuce. And most of my head lettuce, I use plants. I start them in the greenhouse, and we'll see those later. But for loose leaf lettuce, I just broadcast that. You don't have to dig any trenches or anything. Have the soil prepared. You just take it and sprinkle it over the surface, just like that. I've got two different kinds here, and I'm going to do this. The only thing you got to worry about with the loose leaf lettuce that you broadcast like this is that you're going to get way too much. You're going to plant way more than you ever going to use, and it's real easy to overseed. But when these come up, it's like grass, and there's no big deal with that. You can thin those out, but where's my rake? Here it is. It's a little bit of work to thin it out, so don't be overzealous on that. I like to kind of take the back of a row and just kind of mix it up a little bit, get a little more contact with the soil. That'll probably germinate within a week. Unless it really gets cold around here, it'll germinate within a week, and then within a month we'll be pulling loose leaf lettuce. Okay, speaking of lettuce and onions, I've planted some cool weather crops. They call them cold crops, sometimes cool weather crops. They got onions, cabbage, broccoli, lettuce, bok choy, kale, all different kind of plants. And there are a number of herbs that like cool weather, like parsley and dill and fennel. But I've planted broccoli plants and cabbage plants and what's called intercropping. Where between the broccoli and the cabbage, that's going to need a big space, but they don't need it right now. So I've planted some lettuce in those little holes, and I'll harvest that lettuce before the broccoli and cabbage get that big. Intercropping. Successive cropping. What is that? Successive cropping is when these broccoli plants get played out in early summer. I'll pull them out, and then I'll plant this bed with beans or squash or cucumbers or something that really you want to wait till it gets really warm, and they'll all mature in the fall. So that's called successive gardening. This bed I planted probably 2 to 3 weeks earlier than I normally do. The weather this winter has been really nice, but I went ahead and planted it. It looks like it's not going to get that cold in the spring, but what if it does? I planted these things in February, the middle of February. I've got these covers, and let me tell you what I may have talked about this at another show, but all these covers are 8-foot rebar. Doesn't look like 8, but that's what it is, 8-foot rebar. I bent it into a hoop, and then I've bought plastic at your farm store is usually the best place to get it. Sometimes a nursery, it's about 12 foot wide, and it comes in a roll of sheet. And you can see I've rolled it out the right length. And in this bed here, you can see where I've covered it up with plastic. And then if it gets real cold, I've got this burlap I can put on top of it. You probably don't have any burlap, but if you got sheets, covers, quilts, you can put that on there too. And then if it gets like down into the teens, you can run an extension cord from your house over here and put a light bulb on it, and that light bulb will get enough heat inside this little tent to keep those little things toasty. Okay, while we're here, one more thing before we go into the greenhouse. This is elephant garlic. I love garlic. I eat it all the time. It was planted last September, end of August, maybe 1st of September. The little cloves. It will slowly grow during the winter time, doesn't grow a whole lot, but as soon as it gets nice and warm, it's going to shoot up and get about this tall, and then it'll shoot a flower stalk up about this tall. I cut the flower stalk off because I want the energy to go down into the bulb and get bigger bulbs. I'm not interested in the flowers, but when you cut those flowers off, they're really pretty, they dry, and then a lot of people use them in their design, flower designs. But this bed will also be done. Probably I'll harvest it around May. The leaves will turn brown just like onions, and I'll harvest this and I'll plant some beans and some other things in there. Okay, onions. Let's talk about onions before we leave. You can plant onions about 3 different ways. You can buy the seeds, which means you can really get a lot of different varieties. But if you buy the seeds, you probably got to plant them inside about December in order to get them big enough to plant in the spring. Most people buy them 2 other ways. They buy them in the sets, onion sets, or the onion plants. We are kind of taking advantage of in this part of the country because our nurseries and Lowe's and the people that sell these don't do a real good job of selling the right onions that we need around here. First of all, the sets, which I plant every year, but you don't know what you're getting. They're either red sets, yellow sets, or white sets. There's no name that goes with them, so you don't know what variety you're getting. Hopefully they're good varieties, but you don't know. They do pretty well. But the plants that you get around here are all Granix onions. Everybody likes Vidalia sweets, Texas sweets, Walla Walla onions because they're real sweet. Well, these onions are real sweet and they're called Granix. They're all Granix, but they're what they call short day onions. What do we mean by short day onions? Short day onions, well, you have short day, intermediate, and long day onions. Short day onions start bulbing at 10 to 12 hours of sunlight. Intermediate days is 12 to 14, and long day onions are 14 to 16 days. Okay, I'm going to get to the point here in just a second. But say, for instance, you buy short day onions here, they start bulbing at 10 to 12 hours of sunlight. You plant them, they will start bulbing at 10 to 12 hours. Well, we already have 10 hours of sunlight right now, so once you plant them, they're going to start bulbing pretty darn quick. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, the plant isn't big enough to produce a big bulb. You want your onion to get up to at least about 13 leaves before it starts bulbing. If you plant a short day onion right now, it's going to start bulbing almost right away, and you're going to get a nice sweet onion that's going to be about the size of a golf ball. And also the other part of those Granix onions, they don't keep well, so they're going to rot in about 2 months. Guess what? That's the only onion you can buy around here. You can go to any store. I've been to all these stores and nurseries, they all have the Granix onions. The best thing to do for Kentucky is to get an intermediate, which is 12 to 14 hours. And if you plant it now, it'll have plenty of time before it starts bulbing to get those leaves grown to about 13 leaves so that you get a big softball size, we're talking about softball size onion. Okay, clear as mud, right? So when you go to the nursery and look on there, it says Granix onion, short day, talk to that guy and say, hey, how about next year getting us some intermediate onions so that Western Kentucky can grow some really big onions for a change. I think I beat that dog to death then. Let's go to the greenhouse. Okay, along with my raised beds, this is my pride and joy. I know maybe it doesn't look like much, but this is really relaxing when I come out here and work with my plants. And if I don't think I'm God, but I'm making things, I'm making live plants that if it wasn't for me, these things wouldn't exist. So I'm propagating. That's the word that we usually use. And let's talk about cuttings first. And I took some cuttings in the fall, and let's just give you an update of what they look like. This is a brown turkey fig tree. I took 6-inch cuttings, dipped them in the water, root-tone, stuck them in the dirt, and they're almost to the point where I'm going to be taking them out of this pot and put them in their own individual pot. That's brown turkey fig trees, very easy to propagate. This is an angel trumpet, and there's a number of different, there's 2 main different kinds of angel trumpets. It's the Dactyra, which really is what these are right here that are not looking too good because they got too dry in the sun today. But this is an angel trumpet. It has an insignificant bloom and an insignificant, not insignificant bloom, but insignificant seed. So I don't grow them from seeds. I cut about 6 inches. You can almost see that right there. That's the 6 inches I cut off of the plant last year because they don't make it through the winter. They're very tender. Stuck it in here and it's already this big. It's a heavy feeder. I've got a lot of fertilizer on here, and they draw white flies, and I had an infestation. I've got that all cleaned up, but I just want to keep these going about this size until spring. This plant in the catalog will cost about $25 to $30, believe it or not. I don't sell them, sorry. I give them to my friends. Sell them at the plant sale sometimes. Okay, here's some cuttings, and you don't always have to wait till fall to take cuttings. I just took these the other day. I had a plant that was oversized, ugly. It ended up in the trash pit. But I went ahead and took some cuttings on it, and these things will go ahead and root. A lot of plants like this will root. Give them a couple weeks, and then plant them in soil. And then I'll have 4 or 5 of what I just threw away, except these hopefully be prettier. Okay, cuttings. One more thing on cuttings. Well, 2 more. Let me get a nicer one than that. Rosemary, so easy to take cuttings. Cut about 6 inches, strip off the bottom. We had a show on that not too long ago. But this, let's see, probably October, November, December, January, about 4 months old. It needs to be clipped, and I'll get one that probably needs it more than that one does. But it'll send up a straight stalk, and in order to bush it out, I've already done this once with this. Cut off the ends of the tips of these limbs, and every place you cut off the tip, there's going to be at least 2 or 3 more limbs go out, so it'll be more and more bushy. And you can put this on your potatoes tonight, Dan. Oh my, that's something. Okay, I need to do that. And when I did that, I did something that I've never done before. Where's it at? Oh, here it is. I have no luck whatsoever with lavender. I have friends that have lavender bushes and trees. They don't even try, and they have great luck with it. So I took some lavender cuttings off of Carol Slaughter's house down the road. I asked her first, of course, but I took some cuttings just like I did the rosemary, and about half of them make it. The rosemary makes about 99% of the rosemary will be fine, but the lavender, about half of it did, and you can see it really is healthy. So I'm thinking, since I cut, that's the part, the dull part is the part I cut off of the mother plant. Maybe with these, Bud's got a chance with lavender for a change. We'll see. Okay, let's talk about seeds. Get these out of the way a little bit. And before I talk about seeds, let's talk about not canna, but calla lilies. Calla lily is extremely expensive. You buy a calla lily bulb, sometimes that flower will cost like $5. If you're doing a wedding or something, you know how expensive calla lily flowers are. When calla lilies form a big, huge seed pod in the fall. If you'll plant that seed pod, and they look like berries more than seeds, but if you'll plant those, they will, every single one of them will germinate, every single one. So what I did with these are white. 2 years ago, I planted them, and I had 1,000 plants. I planted them out in one of my beds out here, and I didn't take care of them. I lost about half of them. And then in the fall, they had little tiny marble size corms. I planted those last year, and they got a lot bigger. I planted them in my tomatoes, believe it or not. I had planted them down in the tomato row, and when I pulled my tomatoes up, I pulled those up. And then last year they were this big. Okay, I planted them in individual pots this year. You can plant them in the ground, but I planted them in individual pots, and this year they'll bloom. So it takes 2 years, really the 3rd year, to have them bloom from the seed. But if you want thousands of plants, you can take one of those seed pods, and it'll give you a bunch. Now, I could have planted these in the ground, but I like planting a few of them early because, look, they're already up this tall, and this will bloom probably before the calla lilies that you planted in the ground even come up. So it's kind of a little treat to take your friends or your neighbors, take it to work when it's blooming that time of year. Okay, let's plant some seeds real quickly. This is a sunflower head that I took off of a sunflower last year. I'm going to break it down. Hundreds of seeds in this thing, hundreds. And I'm going to plant them in this pot. This pot has potting mix, seed starting mix. It doesn't have any soil in it. It's sterile, so there can't be any funguses. Seed starting mix. Remember I said that seed starting mix, not potting mix, not potting soil, whatever you do. Cover it up with a little bit of that. Press it down, get a good compaction. Stick it in the water, get it real moist, And then when it comes out of there, stick some saran wrap around it, and that'll stay moist even up to 3 or 4 weeks. It depends on how much germination. That'll probably germinate in a week. But I've had these right here, and I see this has just started to germinate. There's a couple of them right there, so I can take that off. Once it starts germinating, take that plastic off because it gets too hot. Don't put them in the sun until after they've started germinating. Here's another one that just started germinating. I love these things, Dan. Look at there. Okay, then what do you do after they get to be this size right here? When the secondary leaves come, which is really the first true leaves, or you can do that right now. I can start potting these up. You take them out of here, you pot them up. By the way, this is foxglove here. You pot them up into potting mix, not potting soil, potting mix. You gotta know the difference because potting mix, it'll do real well. Potting soil, it clumps up and gets hard real quick. You stick them in there, firm them down, and water them again, and then this is what you got. A little note, $1.50 seed packet of foxglove that I bought at the nursery. Sprinkled on here, $1.50. There's got to be over 2,000 plants in there. I don't want to use them all. I've already got over a couple hundred. That right there is 200 plants I got out of that little corner, so you can imagine how many is in here. Give me a call if you want some foxglove plants. I got plenty. Okay. Here's another one. Don't take that plastic off until they start germinating. Don't put that with plastic in the sun because it'll be 110 degrees and it'll cook these little suckers. Okay? What in the heck are these? These look like irises. That's because they are. They're our irises. These are blackberry irises. They grow in my yard, and the bloom turns to little seed pods that look exactly like blackberries. That's what I call blackberry irises. You plant them just like I planted these other seeds last fall, and every one of them germinate. It might take one more year for these to bloom, but these were planted last fall. They really look good. I wish I knew what in the heck this is. I don't. But a friend gave these to me, and I've got a bunch over here. I've got a bunch outside. They grow little babies along the side. You pull them out, stick them in the pot. Well, it looks like we've run out of time today. I'm going out to get me something cold to drink, Dan. I'll meet you out back. This is Bud Kwok, and so long for Master Gardening. Till next time, good gardening.